Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
18-year-old Boy Scout from Texas killed by a falling tree following yesterday's severe storms. It happened as the storms rolled in over Covington at Burt Adams Scout Reservation yesterday. The scout and another camper were inside a tent seeking shelter when the tree came down. The scouts were there for a summer jamboree working to earn merit badges. Grief counselors will be available. The camp is still open.
This afternoon at approximately 3:45, there was a weather-related incident that occurred out here in the southern part of Newton County. We had high winds, hard rain. Right here at the Burt Adams Scout Camp, trees were felled by the wind. A tree unfortunately did fall on one of the campers, and the camper is deceased. They were on.
What was the age of this boy?
He was 14.
And he was a Boy Scout?
Yes. He was one
and
of
they
the
were here
scouts.
from Texas on a camping?
On the summer camp jamboree thing.
How difficult has this day been? I mean, for the folks here, and even for you guys as law enforcement, to know that this young man died in a freak accident.
I can't even imagine what the scout leader and the rest of the troop is going through at this point, not let alone the parents who are that far away from their child.
Okay, this is Bruce Goddard. I have a special guest today. His name is Stephen Knight. I met Stephen around 6 years ago when he joined our company. He's Director of Strategy and Innovation at Service Corporation International, based in Houston, Texas. He's a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin and lives in Cypress, Texas, along with his beautiful wife, Courtney, and their two children, Joshua and Julia, and a rambunctious golden doodle by the name of Eugene, and strong and wonderful memories of their oldest son, Elijah. Stephen and the Knight family founded an organization called Kindness to Action in honor of the legacy of their son, Elijah. I'm not sure about many things, but I'm really sure about this. The Knight family is a very special group of people. And their story of losing their son in 2018 and what they have done since to honor him and his incredible legacy will be very much worth your time today. Start everything with kindness, and the end will be okay, is their mantra. And boy, that's true. So, Stephen, thank you for being here. I hope you can hear me fine. You're there, right?
Yes, sir, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for doing this. And I know you've told this story many times to many different groups. And you've been on TV, you've been on specials on ABC telling this story and what you've done, what you all have done since then. But it's got to be difficult every time you talk through all this, and I appreciate you doing it. So everybody will know, these guys have lived through the worst possible nightmare a family can live through. And so, Stephen, let's talk about your family.
Well, I'm the youngest of a family of 6 kids, so I come from a large family. There's 14 nieces and nephews in this group, so when we all get together for Thanksgiving, you got to be prepared to host about 25 people at once. So it's a pretty fun group of folks. I met my future wife on our very first day of college. She was standing in the dorm room when I walked in, happened to know my potluck roommate from high school, and it began from there. We started our family pretty early. I think we were 24 when we had Elijah. But we were ready, and he was ready too. He tried to come early. He wanted to be born several weeks before his due date, so had to try to keep him in place. But it seemed like he was ready to get started. Little did we know we would only get 14 years with him. We're glad that we had every moment that we did. Our family, I think, is kind of special because we would laugh to tears on a regular basis. And, you know, the more I've talked with other families, it seems like it's fairly unique. I mean, I hope that many other families do so. But with us, it was pretty much every time we got together and ate a whole meal, sitting at the same table, one of the kids would say something to another, and it would start just kind of a cascade of joking and laughing. And before you knew it, we would all be in tears laughing about something kind of random. And Elijah especially, I think, embodied this idea that you're talking about, Bruce, of laugh, think, and cry.
Yeah. Well, one thing for sure that I have learned that it is a healthy thing to laugh, and I think you're right, is the world we live in today. The truth is it's hard to sit at a table with a group of people. I grew up eating dinner together with my family, and there was a lot of laughter at the table, and there was a lot of conversation at the table. Now that days people don't even eat together anymore. So what you're talking about is rather unique. I can promise you that. So he had a great personality. I can tell that by reading some of the stuff, looking at some of the videos I've seen. Just talk about Elijah just a little bit.
Ever since Elijah was really young, he was interesting and funny. I still remember he must have been 2 or 3 years old, and you got one kid who's a toddler, and then his younger brother is only 14 months younger than him, so they're really close in age. Had probably another one on the way by this point, our baby girl. So I was trying to get Elijah down for a nap, and kind of coerced him into it and saying, "Look, Mama's asleep and your brother's asleep," and he goes, "Elijah, awake!" He had his own opinions about exactly what he wanted to do. A lot of funny back and forth between, especially he and his brother. They would be upstairs wrestling, playing, and they would do something we called going overboy, where it just became this obnoxious mess, and no one else could stand to be around them, but they loved it. They'd wrestle like a couple of bear cubs.
Wow.
I think that's one of the reasons that Joshua, our middle son, is now a competitive wrestler in high school. Something that he would do so much with his older brother, he kind of missed it.
I also noticed that he was kind of an engineer-minded kid, right? He became an expert with what's it called?
Yes,
cube.
Rubik's Cube.
Rubik's Cube, yeah.
Yeah, Elijah had a really engineer mindset, you're right. Yeah, the Rubik's Cube is something that he got into pretty early. Ended up upgrading him to one of those speed cubes that can flip back and forth extremely fast. And I think he got to where he could solve it in under a minute, which he was really proud of. He tried to do it for a talent show at school one time. Unfortunately, he twisted it too hard, and the whole Rubik's Cube exploded, and all the pieces went all over the stage. Needless to say, he did not make the talent show that year, but that's how he was committed to it.
He also played saxophone, right? I mean, he was musically inclined too. And I know the story, and I know they'd like to hear it, that since his death, they actually created a musical piece in his honor. This pretty incredible story. So talk about him and his musical life.
Yeah, Elijah was really certain he wanted to play the saxophone. We had no idea why, but when he started in the middle school band in 6th grade, he just gravitated to it. Came home and very proudly honked out this awful sound that just reverberated through the entire house. The walls were shaking with the noise of the saxophone, but he had this huge smile on his face for making this one big note. But he stuck with it and ended up becoming the first chair saxophone throughout his 7th grade year, and was excited about moving forward. We had, right before he had died, actually, we upgraded him to a really nice saxophone. We found out those are one of the more expensive brass instruments, by the way. We got him a really nice one, and he was so proud of that thing. So yeah, he really enjoyed, being part of that band. They called it the band fam. So one thing he did for one of his classmates' birthdays, actually, in the band, was he found out it was her birthday and nobody had really done anything yet. So he convinced everybody else in the band secretly to play happy birthday for her in the middle of class. And she wrote something to us after about how much she appreciated that.
Wow.
He was also kind of a jokester, so he was willing to do some silly things. He got up on a chair one time and played the big saxophone solo from Careless Whisper in front of everybody. Stuff that I would never do.
Yeah.
But like you were asking, Bruce, one thing that's been astonishing to us is the artwork and gifts that have come our way after Elijah died. He left such an impression on people. So the story is that Elijah's saxophone private lesson teacher had been, meeting with Elijah on a weekly basis for a year or more. We didn't really think anything special about it. We kind of thought it was just an ordinary, private lesson tutor, and that's it. But when we lost Elijah, his name's Scott McLaren. Scott contacted us several months later and said, there's going to be a performance at the high school, and it's a piece that I composed in honor of your son. And if you'd like to attend, here's the date and time. So we showed up, and at the end of the full band performance, the regular thing, it was a packed auditorium full of people. There was a saxophone quartet that played this 8-minute long composition that literally speaks Elijah's name. Scott described it to us, and there's a theme that runs through the whole piece, this little 3-note theme that begins the piece and continues all the way through. And those 3 notes are the 3 syllables of Elijah's name. And he said that came to him in this moment of inspiration as he was asking Elijah for help to try to write something.
Yeah.
The piece is called Immeasurable.
Oh, wow. What other things about Elijah or his siblings?
Okay. So Joshua, our middle child, is our extrovert. He's high energy, always wanting to be doing something. He's got something we call the thing of the month. He's always changing his interests, and he'll get really deeply into something obscure, like doing yo-yo tricks or learning how to do a walking handstand across the field. Or for 1 month, it was electric guitar. Now he's on to ukulele. So he kind of moves through things quickly. The couple of things that he's stuck with are rock climbing, and he actually works at the rock gym, and wrestling. He's now a varsity high school wrestler. So he's a fun one. Joshua turned 16 recently. Okay. He's got a car, and we hardly see him because he's in and out of the house so much.
Wow. It all happens in a hurry, doesn't it?
It sure does.
I got a grandchild. My oldest grandchild just turned 15, and she's learning to drive. So I get it. Yeah.
Daughter Julia is 13 years old right now, and her whole mission in life is to dance. She's actually she dances so much that she does the off-campus PE, where she's at the studio over 15 hours a week. I forget what it is. And we're not the parents that push her on this kind of stuff, Bruce. We're not like, hey, you need to make sure you win this competition. We've tried to encourage her to try other things, and she has, and she just keeps coming back to dance. She started in gymnastics, but now this is her passion, and she loves it.
One of the things that hits me as I'm talking to you is that there be people listening to this that have lost a child. I mean, that happens. But there are also people that will be listening that will want to go hug their child when they get through with this. But the thing that hits me as you talk about this, you have this saying, and I don't know where this came from. You can talk about it, but it says, I must go on, I can't go on, I will go on. Somehow, though the sky fell for you guys, you are moving on with life, and you're honoring Elijah as you do that. You're honoring him. You're, what, a little over 3.5 years from this now. You're doing everything in your power to make a normal life for your kids, and you're going on with life, and it honors Elijah. And I think people need to hear what you're saying, that the worst nightmare, because there are people that never get out of that, and there are people that think, I'm in it now, I'll never have a normal life again. And it's a powerful thing that I'm hearing.
You're right, Bruce. And we're not doing something special or magical. Unfortunately, time moves inexorably forward, and as much as we grind against it, it's going to keep pulling us. One thing that has kept us going is our 2 surviving children.
Yeah.
You just have to get up in the morning and help them get to school and get to the grocery store and all the normal mundane things that need to happen. But throughout this whole 3.5 years, Courtney and I have constantly asked each other, how are we going to do this? And the answer is, we are doing it.
Right. You are.
And there's really no other option.
You are, and I can see it. So that goes back to Courtney. Is this strengthen your relationship, or has it made it more difficult? That may be a very personal question, but I think there's probably husbands and wives that need to hear that too.
Sure. It's important because we heard the statistics, and I think that some of the statistics may be flawed about how many people's relationship can't survive the loss of a child. I'm not sure that it's as high as people say it is. But yeah, certainly if there are underlying issues, those will come out. Basically, I think after an event like this, you become, for better or worse, you become more brutally honest with one another. And I'm so thankful to have Courtney as my partner in life, because without her, this wouldn't work. And something that we said to one another the night that this happened, Bruce, this became our little mantra to one another, is only together.
Right. Wow.
Right. There were a lot of people that, especially for the dads out there, that would tell me, you need to be strong for your wife. And I said, that's bull, right? There's no way that we're going to be weak together.
Right.
We'll just lean in on each other, and only together will we go forward.
Right.
That's what we've been trying to stick with.
Right. Well, I can tell you, I've never been in your shoes, but being in the business I'm in, I've walked through it with many people, and I know people desperately need to hear your story. I mean, for 2 reasons. One, if they're in this place, or they could be in it, or the other piece is they want to go hug their kid. You're not promised tomorrow. You never know what's going to happen. And so let's talk about what happened in June of 2018. Before we do that, let me ask you about, he was a Boy Scout. You're an Eagle Scout. Is that right? Did I understand that?
Yep, I'm an Eagle Scout.
Yeah, so he was pursuing being an Eagle Scout. So he was obviously very important to him with Scouts, and he was going on a week-long camporee, I guess they called it, to Georgia, right? So talk about that, what was going on.
Yeah, so Elijah and Joshua were both in the same scout troop, and Elijah was the final rank before becoming an Eagle Scout, and that's what he was working on. And this last summer camp was going to help him get the last set of requirements he needed to fulfill his, responsibilities to become an Eagle Scout. We were able to pack up the 2 boys together with their trunks, took them down to the church where they got on the bus. We all have a little secret handshake that we would do. Each of us had a unique one with Elijah, and he did the little secret handshakes with each of us, and we all did our goodbyes. He was excited to sit next to his best friend on the bus and waved and smiled as he drove off. And that's unfortunately the last time we got to see him. So Bruce, being from Georgia, the way summer storms work out there. So on the second full day of the camp, a pretty fierce storm was brewing and came in quickly onto this camp. Some of the camp was able to get into hard shelter, including Joshua's area, but where Elijah was, they did not make it into any hard shelter. He and his buddies huddled into just one of those canvas tents. So he was in there with a couple other boys, and a huge tree blew down in the middle of this storm and collapsed the tent on top of them. The other boys, thankfully, were able to climb out of there unhurt, but Elijah was pinned under this probably 100-foot tall tree and couldn't get out.
Wow. I've got a place at Lake Oconee, and literally less than an hour is that camp. And I'm watching the news, and which I rarely do, to be honest, but especially the local news, probably the Atlanta news. And I've told my wife, I said, this kid just has been killed in Covington at this Boy Scout camp, and he's from Texas. Can you imagine what if this family's going? I had no idea it was you. And it was 2 or 3 days before I made that connection, and I texted you when I realized it. I didn't know what I could do, but in my business, my inclination is to run there to look after your boy. I mean, that's what I do. That's what I've done all my life. Sometimes people say, "Who's taking care of my boy?" And I would have run. I was that close to what's going on. But man, I felt like that whoever's son it was. But I realized the connection. Here I am, whatever the miles is, and I know you, and we work for the same company. We've been in meetings together, wherever, and it was unbelievable.
Yeah, it created an incredibly desperate feeling, and anybody who's been through this knows what it's like. It's difficult to describe, but you're just enjoying your day and everything seems totally normal. We didn't have any kind of premonition that anything bad was happening on the other side of the country. I got a phone call, and it was the scout leader, and he said, "Let me let you talk to somebody." And he passed me to someone else, and he said, "Mr. Knight, this is the Newton County coroner."
Oh my
And I just said, "Oh no." And he said, "I'm afraid so, sir." And I said, "Which one?" Because it was both of our boys there. He said, "It's Elijah."
Did you come to Georgia? What was your next step there?
My first phone call, while Courtney was literally screaming in the background, you could hear it, was to my boss there at Service Corporation International. His name was John. And I said, "I need your help. I don't know what we're going to do, but you can hear Courtney, and our son just died, and we need to get to him." And the company did something really extraordinary. There was no way to get a commercial flight to get to him and to Joshua. It would have been 24 hours. And somehow somebody pulled all the strings and got the company jet to come to where we could jump on like as soon as it possibly could get there, and flew us overnight, all night, to Georgia.
Wow.
And I still remember the pilot, who's since retired, Mike. He said to me after everything was over, wonderful guy.
Yeah.
And so Mike, the pilot, later told me this was the best use of the company plane that we've ever used.
Oh, and I got to tell you, I'm not surprised that they did that. I can't help but think, as you're saying this, you came from a dozen years or so from waste management and completely different, and now you're working with this funeral company. You have no experience as really in the funeral business, but here you are using your expertise in this big funeral company, and here you find yourself dealing with something that you can pick up the phone and get the resources running that it would be impossible any other way. I mean, that's a story in itself to me.
Well, when I was interviewing to join this company, I remember John, my boss, telling me it's a caring company, it's a hugging company, and that's true.
Really is.
It took me, some time to kind of get things situated with my family before I could come back to the office. But when I did, one of the first people who wanted to meet with me was the president of the company, who hugged me. I mean, this is a
Right.
super high individual in the organization, makes a bunch of money and is super important, and thousands and thousands of people work for him, and he wanted to hug me and ask me really earnestly, are you okay? Can you do this? Are you okay to continue working in the kind of field you've been in, helping other people in the funeral business? And I told him that it's made the depth of this profession far more important and impactful to me.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's what I was going to say. You have to be better at what you do more than ever. It's almost like you got a completely different perspective on what goes on out here. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible.
That's right.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not surprised of the hug. I'm not surprised of the jet coming out. The truth is, it's a big company, but those are some great people that I know, and it's a great company. That is for sure. I have 3 sons, Stephen, and I can't imagine. The grief that you went through and still go through in telling this story. I just can't imagine. And like I said, I walked through it with people. It's the worst nightmare that can happen. The fact that you're taking it and slowly figuring out how to bring good to the world from it is the incredible story. One of the things that I know that I think is, before we move on, and his room, is that still just like he had it? Did you leave that? To talk about that a little bit.
Everything is exactly where Elijah left it. His dirty clothes are still in his hamper because they had just still a little bit of his smell on it. We kept the door closed as long as we could so that, we could walk in there and still kind of pick up his scent. His robe is hanging on the back of his door. All his little trinkets are there. Everything is exactly where it was 3.5 years ago.
Wow.
And there's other people who deal with it in different ways. Some people need to pack things in boxes and rearrange and make it different as quickly as possible. And that's fine. There's not a right or wrong way to do it. For us, it's just become kind of a place of solace. And in fact, his bed is where his urn sits right now.
Wow.
Wrapped in the little baby blanket that we swaddled him in when he came home from the hospital.
Wow.
So that's where we go when we want to just have some quiet time with Elijah.
Wow. And how about his siblings? Are they okay? Kids can be resilient, can't they?
Yeah, they grieve in really different ways. And they grieve, I think, especially deeply and below the surface. And so with our kids, they stay busy with keeping their days full of activities and staying distracted. And I think that's been a real help to them. Julia, in a way, I think uses dance as a form of therapy. It's a great outlet for her. But I mean, there are some heartbreaking conversations that you end up having, Bruce. I mean,
I'm sure
Joshua at one point asked in a really deep moment of despair, he said, what if I live until I'm an old man? When I die, will Elijah still recognize me? It's hard to have an answer to something like that, but we said, you boys will always recognize each other. You'll always know each other.
The Bible says a day is like 1,000 years, or 1,000 years like a day. And when my dad died, and 25 years later, I looked and I did the math on that, and to him, it's been about 30 minutes. And so my point was, he hadn't had a chance to watch one episode of Andy of Mayberry before I get there. So that's a pretty good thought. And obviously, I don't know about the literal interpretation, but the principle, I think, is really true, that what you told him, I believe it. I really do believe they will know each other, and it will not feel like long for Elijah, and which is very long for you guys, but not for him. So tell me, what is Elijah's legacy?
So this was about a week or two before Elijah went off to the summer camp. As I said, he was working on his Eagle Scout badge, and you need to do a big Eagle Scout project. he was struggling to come up with an idea that would be sufficient. So Elijah, with his engineering mindset, he wanted to solve systemic problems and fix them at the source so there would never be an issue again. He said one time, I don't want to hug a tree or save a whale. I want to make it where nobody ever has to hug trees or save whales again. I just wanted to fix it. And as he was brainstorming with Courtney, he came up with this phrase, start everything with kindness and the end will be okay. He was thinking about global systemic issues, inequality and racism and, all kinds of social problems and war.
Right.
If we started everything with kindness, none of those would be a problem anymore. He hadn't quite formed it into what he was going to do with it. He just had that nugget of wisdom. And we realized when he died that would be the legacy that we carry forward. It's this mission of kindness. And at his service, we asked everyone for two things, kindness and action. Because one without the other doesn't do anything.
Right.
If you have kindness and action together, then you can make meaningful and systemic changes to the world. So that's where we founded Kindness to Action, this nonprofit in Elijah's honor. And the cool part about it is that everyone who interacts with this mission and decides to do something about it can do so in their own way, according to their own talents and interests. We're not defining a mandate that here's exactly what it means to go be kind and do kind actions in the world. It's kind of organic, and people who are gravitating toward this come up with their own ideas and things we've never thought of before. So it's kind of beautiful to watch it unfolding everywhere.
So explain how it unfolds. I've got a Kindness to Action coin in my hand as I'm talking to you, and it says on it, start everything with kindness and the end will be okay.
So one of the things we came up with is these kindness coins, these tokens that you can give or award to someone in recognition of their acts of kindness. We've made thousands of these coins. They're kind of heavy, weighted metal, right? They have gravitas, and they're a tangible thing that you can touch and experience. And each of them has a unique serial number on it. So the idea is they're free from kindnesstooaction.org. You can request them in the hopes that they will be freely given to others.
Right.
And then as you give a coin to somebody, maybe you take a picture and write down the serial number, and then you can go to the website and register coin number, 123456. I give it to Mr. Bruce Goddard in recognition of his kindness and taking care of others. Write a little note and put a picture on there, and then you start seeing these pop up on this map on the website, and they're all over the world. We've had some folks who travel frequently. There's a travel agent who wanted to carry a bunch with her, and you start seeing these kindness coins just popping up all over the place. It's been interesting. We had a group of folks that were at our house, some of our really close friends, and we were trying to come up with something that would be worthy of Elijah and worthy of the person who was doing an act of kindness. What would it be that we could give or do for them in recognition? And one of the things that we had recently received was a challenge coin. Those, inspired by the military, officers carry a challenge coin and give them as an act of respect for others. And we'd received one from a group that helped with the funeral services. And it was this beautiful little emblem that we got to keep. And somebody was like, well, what about one of those challenge coins? So that's where it took off. We started playing with the idea and came up with, well, not only should we be able to give out coins, but it would be great if everyone could kind of share stories with each other and recognize others who've impacted them. So that's when it came up with this whole idea of putting it on a website with a map.
What a great idea. And it's kindnesstooaction.org right? kindness2action.org. And then you can go to that website. You can get a coin or a couple of coins. Or I don't know how many you give out to start with. I don't know how you do that. But you can also, I think you probably won't mention this, but you can donate to this organization to keep this going. But what you see is people spurred on to do acts of kindness, just random acts of kindness that really does systematically change the world you live in. It's pretty inspiring not only to do something kind, but to also inspire somebody else to do something kind. And it's rewarding on both ends. And it's just it's a wonderful idea. And what a way to honor Elijah. I mean, just incredible that he came up with the saying, or you had no idea what was going to happen, to be able to use that to make the world a better place is what you do. So let me ask you this. If you got, again, people listening to this that I'm sure you have their undivided attention. What is your message to people who have lost a child and maybe recently that are really covered up and can't get their breath, or maybe they're in the middle of a child that's sick and probably may not make it? Just kind of what is your message to them, I think, is the first question.
First of all, you will keep going. Whether you like it or not, you will keep going. At the beginning, you ask yourself, how are we going to get through the next hour? And then it starts to be, how are we going to get through this day? And then how are we going to get through the next week? And what we did is kept a journal, because it's a fog, it's a blur in the midst of such deep grief that you don't really experience the time that's passing. It just all blends together.
Right.
And I needed something that I could look back on and say, hey, we have made it 4 days. We've made it 2 weeks. We've made it 2 months.
Right.
And we kept that journal for about a year. And that's something I'm actually writing down, and maybe we'll be able to share with others in the future, just so you know you're not alone in the journey. It's the most difficult thing you can possibly go through. Of course, everybody says that, but you won't understand it until it happens. It's mainly, I think, important for those who are supporting the family who is going through this to learn some of the things to say and not say. And it just takes a quick Google search to do so. But things like any phrase that begins with "at least" is probably not going to be well received.
Right.
Well, at least, and we heard this, at least you have 2 healthy children. You know, we want our complete family. We want our boy back. We want our 3 children. So there's no at least. And also one book I read that I thought was pretty helpful to me was called Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved. And the story is that this person, the author, has terminal cancer. Somebody comes to the door and tells the husband, there's a reason why this is happening. And he goes, really? Great. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, right.
There's no answer, right? It's difficult. So this is the biggest struggle I've probably had personally, Bruce, is trying to figure out an answer to the question, why?
Right.
And I've read a whole stack of books and talked with ministers and counselors, and I haven't found a why.
Right.
I think that there's certainly, we can acknowledge that some positive things happen out of this tragedy. But I'll never accept that is an equal trade-off for our son no longer being in the world.
Absolutely.
So I can't really find an answer to why. And it's something I struggled with pretty hard.
Yeah, and so people get in trouble when they go in and start saying, let me tell you why I think this, that's a problem. I'll tell you what happened to me. I was young in this profession, and a guy had been murdered. I knew him well and knew his family, and his son, who was 12 years older than me, but I was a young man. He came out, and I saw him. I went up and, shook his hand and hugged him and said, I know how you feel. And he looked at me and said, you don't have any idea how I feel. And I learned that lesson. I never said that again. And I don't know how they feel. I don't know. I think maybe the biggest help for people that come around is just hug you and they're there. That's just
exactly.
This fact that you're here and you're showing your concern for us is probably the best thing you could do. You don't need many speeches at that point.
Exactly right. We had people who came alongside us and literally walked with us through the valley of the shadow of death, and that meant everything to us.
Right. So the other thing is the brevity of life. I don't know how that affects you with your other kids. How do you live in the fear that that could happen again, or that you never know when you see your kid that you're going to see them again? You see that from a different perspective than most other people. Most people take it for granted. I'm going to see them. You can't take that for granted anymore after what you've been through.
Yeah, it changes your whole perspective. So we don't get real animated about little things anymore, right? Like it used to be we wanted our kids to get straight A's and be above average and everything and be stars of their sports teams and all of that, right? You want the best. But pretty soon we realized we just want them here. As long as we have our kids here, that's enough for us right now, right?
Right.
And we wanted, as a family, we decided to try to make new and positive memories together. So especially like we talked about, the kids are getting older kind of quickly. They get busy as they get hands on a car of their own. We figure we need to try to do some vacations together and have more experiences. We've never once spent money on a trip as a family and regretted it. You know,
Right.
It's the kind of thing that it's irreplaceable. And we've only got so many years to try to do some of these activities. So we're really doubling down on trying to make the most of it while we can. Like you said, no idea how long you've got. So
You really
try to
don't.
do what we can.
You really don't. That is a fact. The other thing, I guess, that I think probably you have been inspired by the acts of kindness that you see. That was his mantra. That's your mantra. How has the kindness that you've seen through your organization, how has that inspired you? What does that mean to you, that people are actually doing these things?
Yeah, when other people go off and do an act of kindness, especially when they do something in the knowledge that they're trying to honor Elijah's memory a little bit, it keeps Elijah close to us. It keeps him present in the world, because we don't get to watch Elijah grow up and see what kinds of things he would have done to impact the world. And we expected such great things from him. He was so intelligent and ambitious and active. He would wake up every Saturday morning with a new idea and start tinkering and building something at the breakfast room table, right? And we had no idea what he was making. So he was always doing.
Right.
And in his absence, we're asking his generation, especially, that's like today's high school kids and us, their parents, to support them in doing these acts of kindness and acts that will improve the rest of the world in Elijah's stead. Wow. Since we don't get to have him around. So when other people do this, for us personally, it keeps Elijah a little bit more alive and present for us. It means a lot.
And you honor him. You honor his 14-year-old life by doing that. Mm-hmm. And what a story, unbelievable story. Stephen, thank you, my friend, for doing this. I know it's not easy doing this, but it's a story that people need to hear. You guys are classy people. I have a lot of respect for you. I'm glad I know you. I hate you had to go through this. I can't imagine going through it. But you're honoring your son. So God bless you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Bruce. We always enjoy talking about our boy, and I appreciate you focusing on him for a little bit.
Elijah was determined to make this world a better place. I know that Stephen had something that he always would say, and I'm going to ask you to come on up, Stephen, now and share that with us. Stephen's an amazing dad. Courtney's an amazing mom. Two amazing kids here and one waiting for them.
Thank you all for being here. I'm going to ask you for two things at the end of all of this: kindness and action. First of all, thank you so much for everybody who has jumped in to this awful mess with us. It was too soon, it was too early, it was completely unexpected, and our hearts are completely broken. And it's our baby. I know, sweetheart. It's our baby. Elijah is our firstborn son. He is one of 19 grandkids. He is our beloved child. But going from is to was is the hardest part of this whole transition. Courtney and I have forever underestimated how difficult that is. He was way ahead of us with how his brain worked, but he was also kind, and he was also loving and accepting of people who were different from him. And he wasn't ever embarrassed to be around and associate with others who might be marginalized. And I wasn't that kid, and I don't know where he got that, sweetheart. Recently, Courtney and him were trying to discuss the potential Eagle Scout projects that he might be interested in doing, and he had a hard time picking one because he wanted to do something about equality and fairness, and it's like, which one do you pick? You know, gender equality, racial equality, bullying, gun control, marriage equality, what? And that's where you have with you what he told Courtney. Start everything with kindness, and the end will be okay. We're not going to get to watch Elijah do all the things we were so excited to watch him do. I'm asking for your help to make those happen. Instead of saying, somebody should invent a way to fix that, say, I should invent a way to fix that. We were really young parents, and 24, I think, when we brought Elijah home from the hospital, and Courtney was exhausted and lay down, and Elijah was this skinny little thing, 5 pounds, 6 ounces, scrawny little leg, little frog legs, and we didn't know how to be parents yet. So he was in his little Moses basket next to our dresser, and I stood there over his bed, over his Moses basket, feeling like I needed to be doing something. How do I continue making sure he just keeps breathing all night? How do we do that? And I was exhausted and realized that I couldn't stand there all night, and the only thing I could figure out how to do was to pray for him. And so that night I said a prayer over him, over his little Moses basket. And I said that same prayer over him every night for the rest of his life. And he didn't know that. I never said it to him. It was only after he was in bed, and we'd go up and check on all the kids, and he'd be asleep. And I'll just say the prayer over him one more time. Elijah James, I pray that God will watch over you and send an angel to stand guard at your bed tonight. In Jesus' name. Sleep well, sweet boy.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.